Hey there, I'm Holland and I'm with Memphis Public Library, and welcome to Community Art Academy. We've partnered with the University of Memphis's Art Education Department to bring you an art lesson this week using model magic clay. But first, we're going to read a book called Cake Kingdom. It's written by Kayla Trin and illustrated by David Ng. Once upon a time, on a bright and sunny day, a new bakery opened on Sugar Frosting Way. Through the frosted windows was a kingdom of sweets, all baked to perfection and ready to eat. The shelves were full of pastries all perfectly dressed, each frosted, sugared, and ready to impress. But there was one group that towered above the rest, trying its hardest to look the very best. The cakes sat like kings on top with only one thought, that they were better than the other goods in the shop. Look how small the cupcakes are, and look how flat the cookies are. Compared to the others, we are obviously shining stars. As the cakes chattered, they looked over and saw the baker putting something up on the wall. A beautiful poster of a splendidly sliced cake with insides as white as a fresh snowflake. "Look," they cried, "that must be how we look inside. Elegant and white, who knew we were so bright?" It was then that the first customer ordered a slice of cake with the finest price. The cake was then cut, revealing its insides, but it was not white, to everyone's surprise. Only a sharp shade of pink had appeared, which the others all found weird. "You are not a real cake like the rest of us," accused the big wedding cake. "What do you mean? Of course I am," stammered the strawberry cake, who let out a shivery shake. The other cakes then began to shout, "Leave! Get out of here! We are kicking you out!" And with one last look, feeling a little low, the strawberry cake disappeared down below. The bell on the door danced as the second customer walked in. He pointed to a cake saying, "I would like mine thin." The other cakes fell silent when they saw the color inside. The chosen cake could not hide, no matter how hard he tried. "You must not be a real cake either," announced the cruel wedding cake. "Barely a worthy creature," sneered the others. Then more cakes began to shout, "All brown cakes must be kicked out." The heartbroken chocolate cake soon climbed down, only glancing back to give them a big frown. The next customer then called out, "I would like a big slice of that cake over there. I heard that your cakes are beyond compare." The next cake revealed a mellow yellow inside, another color that was to be denied. The others then said, "You can't stay here, you're too distracting." So with one last look, the yellow cake was sent packing. Each time a customer paid, another cake was betrayed. Finally, one day, the wedding cake found himself a little lonely. "I wonder what the other cakes are doing down below me." But what he saw below was quite confusing. The cakes and the others were all partying. And as the wedding cake sat on the top shelf with no friends and all by himself, he realized that it was fine to be different. Everyone could have a different pigment. The wedding cake decided then and there something he thought to be very fair. Differences did not have to keep them divided, for he had now discovered it could make them united. And out of the blue, he knew just what to do. He quickly slid down and gave a big call to every sweet treat down below that he saw. I have something to say," he exclaimed. The other cakes then turned around, looking a little restrained. "I'm sorry for kicking your cakes out," the wedding cake said with a big pout. "I know now that I was wrong. I just want all of us to finally get along." "Why should we trust you?" they all asked, bickering about what he had done in the past. But before any treat could make another sound, the baker immediately turned around. He cut a slice of the wedding cake, putting it on a separate plate. But inside the cake sparkled rainbow confetti, hardly what the cakes had once considered trendy. And not another word was spoken about being different, for the baked goods were now all friends, everyone indifferent. The end.
Today we're going to be working with air dry clay, which is one of our vocabulary words. That basically means a clay that can dry just out in the air. You wouldn't have to like bake it or leave it out in the sun. It just needs a little part of it that's still white, or whatever color you chose to use for this project, and it'll dry out all by itself. So today we just read a story about a bunch of cakes that weren't able to get along because of how they looked on the inside. So all working together, if we're not all able to get along and accept each other, then we're just going to live in a very hateful, unpleasant world. And the story of this lesson is, it doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter who we are in terms of appearance. No matter like if you need to use a cane, or if you need to, or if you have like asthma, arthritis, or if you're just like different from other people, maybe you have like a birthmark, or maybe your skin color is different. It doesn't matter, we can all get along and learn to work together and love each other. So today we're going to be making a cake. And the idea behind this project is we're going to be making a cake that is unique to you, that maybe has your favorite color, or maybe it's like your favorite kind of cake. Maybe you'll make like a chocolate cake, or you'll make a strawberry cake. Or maybe you'll make like something fun like funfetti or a wedding cake. It doesn't matter, it just depends on what you want to do. And our vocab terms for today are going to revolve around colors. So we have the primary colors right here, which are yellow, red, and blue, and they cannot be mixed. And then we have secondaries like orange, green, and purple, which can be mixed using some of these primary colors, and I'll get into how to mix those later. You may have heard about these before. And then like you've got other colors, tertiary, which can be things like green, blue, or more purple, red. There's just all sorts of colors out there that you can use, things that you can mix, or things that you can just discover on your own by practicing with paint. So to start out, we're going to need a cake. So when you're starting out with your cake, I would recommend deciding what kind of cake you want to do. You want a cake that's just one tier, so that means like one layer of cake? Or do you want like a wedding cake that's really big and has a bunch of layers on it? For me, I'm just going to go with one layer. And the easiest way to make a cake is to make a ball out of your clay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, no cake is. But getting this general sort of ball shape will be one of the easiest ways to get started. And from there, maybe you have some paper underneath it just so it doesn't stain like the table or whatever you're working on. From there, you can press down using your palm right here. Press down all around it, and you can see it's starting to make that sort of cake shape. And the more you press down, the flatter it will get, so if you need to, you can look up, see what your cake looks like so far. If you don't like how it looks, you can always just smush it up and start over. That's the great thing about these kinds of clays. As long as they're wet, they're still workable. You'll still be able to like squish them, mold them, however you want them. So I'm just going to get a nice cake shape. And if you need to, you can always use your palm again to press the sides down. A little bit of tapping. And like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, you may prefer like the way this looks right here, the one that you've been pressing down into the table, because it'll often be more flat. And if you have any extra clay, you can make things like candles or maybe little flowers. I don't, so I'm going to be working more with color, which leads us to the second part of this. Since this is a clay that's made out of paper, you'll be able to use almost anything to make a mark on it. I don't think pencils work very well. In my experience, they don't work as nicely as something like markers or paint. So to start out with, I'm going to show you guys how to use some markers. And I really like the color blue. So I think I'm going to be using a lot of blue in this. But of course, you can use any color you want. Or maybe some new fantastical color you're able to make up using your paint. And you can start anywhere, although, like I said earlier, so you're gonna leave some part blank to dry out. For me, I find it easier to leave the bottom blank because you're not really gonna see that when you set it up anyway. You don't usually see the bottom of cakes. So I'm going to start out by coloring a few of the sides with some blue. You can see here how easily the markers go on. And I wouldn't worry too much about it looking super neat because, like I said, no cake's perfect. And this is about having fun and putting colors that you like on something. You know, to make a cake that is unique to you. And hey, let's say I get tired of all this blue. Maybe I want to add a different color on it. Since I didn't color it all the way, I'd also have paper towels with me, because since this is still wet, a little slick, you might get your hands a little dirty, but these are washable, so they should come off with a little bit of soap and water. So I'm going to use purple, which is a secondary color, to finish off the rest of the side of this cake. And I've left the top blank so far because I think this will be like the best place to show you guys how to use some watercolor. Because it's a big white, it's almost like a round canvas. And if you want to wait for it to dry a little bit, that's absolutely fine. It'll take a while, but it'll eventually start to firm up and make it much easier for you to use. So, the great thing about watercolor is it's completely water soluble. You can wash it off with just a little bit of soap and water. The only problem with it is you can't really remove it once it's on something. Once the color is there, it's going to be there forever, at least in terms of this paper clay. When you're using watercolor, just keep in mind, maybe you'll want to draw it out on a piece of paper first, or maybe you'll want to like test it out on this, like a white piece of paper. And if you like the designs that you come up on this paper, you can tear it or cut it up later and then glue it right back on top of the cake, or on the sides, just wherever you want. So I'm going to continue with a little bit of watercolor. You're going to want to get your brush nice and wet first, and you should have these in your bag. Just dip it in a little bit of that paint. And if you want to, maybe you want to make it a little bit of a lighter color, you can put it right here on the top of your container. What you can do is you can wash out your brush with another container of water. Take a little bit of this and add it to there, and you'll make the color much lighter than it was before because there's more water in there. And so from there, you can start painting. And you can see this is a much lighter color than it was in the pan because of that extra water, just adding a little bit more, just making it much lighter. And another thing about watercolor is you can mix them. So, for example, maybe I want a little bit of purple and a little bit of blue mixed together. I take a little bit of this, and I can put it like, you're just gonna wanna put it on something dry. I think the top of this works really well for mixing. Put a little bit there, and then clean off your brush. Get a little more water. Get some of that purple. And then you start mixing it together. And if you don't get the color you want at first, that's fine. Just clean off your brush. Get a little more of that other color, add it in and mix it. And you'll see how we've got a much different color of purple than we do right here. And it's also not completely blue, like right here. So you can take your new color and add it to the top of your cake. And it may not be completely like colored up and dark at first, but you can always come back in once this watercolor is dried and add more layers. You can also mix on top of it. Like that. And since I'm making this very exciting blue and purple cake, maybe I want to add a little bit more with some of this paper. So when it comes to using paper, you can either tear it or cut it. And it really depends on what you have and what you want to use. Maybe you don't want to ask for help with scissors, or you don't want to use it because you don't like how it looks. That's perfectly fine. You just tear it and do whatever shapes you want. If this is too big, you can tear it some more, as small as you need it to be. And from there, you can take a little bit of glue, take a little bit of glue, and just smother the side of it with some glue, and you put it on top. And you can use this to make things like, you know how sometimes cakes will have like little flowers on top that you can eat? Maybe you can make a flower, or maybe you can make some sprinkles. It really just depends on what you want to do. For me, I think I like the idea of some sprinkles, but it'd be a little hard to get that small with scissors, so I'm going to be tearing some more. So you can tear into like these sorts of small pieces. It's a bit chunky, but that's alright. There's some sprinkles that are very chunky. And you can put this on top of the watercolor. It goes on just fine. And maybe you want to add a little more color before you go over something. So just clean off your brush. Get a little bit of that. Clean it up again. More water. And then you can go over what you just did, and you can see that it becomes much darker. We're going to let that dry a little bit and paste some more of these sprinkles. Now, if you're using scissors with this, I would, if you're a little younger, I would ask maybe for help from an older sibling or a parent, a guardian, someone around who can help you out. But if you're just tearing, just make sure you clean up any mess you leave behind. Pick it up, throw it in the garbage, whatever. you don't have to use just this one color, like I am. You can use yellow, orange, green, whatever color suits your fancy. Or like I said, if you mixed a color you really like, take your brush and paint it on here. I'll show you that in just a second. Clean off your brush, take a little bit of color, and you apply it to the paper like so. And once that dries out, you can cut it out or tear it out and glue it right on top of the cake. Make something special and unique to you. Now once you've come to a stopping point, maybe your cake's done or maybe you want to take a break, you can take your cake and I put it up high out of the reach of pets like dogs, cats, maybe you have a lizard that climbs on things, or maybe your pesky sibling wants to try and eat it. Just put it up there where it can dry and be by itself for a little bit. And after about a couple of hours, you should notice a difference. It'll become a little harder to work with and a little more ready to be shown off. And of course, you can do these decorations in layers. You can do a little bit of paint first, put it up to dry, and then take it back down and work on it some more. It's really just about how far you want to get with it. And of course, if you're using markers or glue, put the cap back on, make sure it doesn't dry out. And take your papers, your watercolors, put them back up. Also, probably out of the reach of an animal. You don't want them to eat little bits of watercolor. Even if it doesn't hurt them, it just doesn't taste good. They'd much rather have actual treats or food instead of just your art supplies. And if you had someone help you cut, or you were cutting something, I'd take it back to a parent or a guardian and have them set it up and have them put it up for you. Just so no one gets hurt trying to set it up somewhere high. And this cake may take a while. A little longer than you expected, that's alright. At the end, you should have something you're really happy with. Something that reminds yourself of you. Or maybe someone you love. You could always make it for a sibling, someone's birthday. Just something to say that you're unique and I really like you. Goodbye.